I love what they do out there. I love their Fresh Herb CSA. It's a beautiful space. So if you are able to get out there when doors open again, I highly encourage it. Right now we're doing our makeshift class. I do a lot of in-person classes, so bear with me trying to work while sitting and try to get everything in the view of the camera. If at any point you can't hear me properly, you can't see something that I'm working with because maybe it's out of the shot, or if you have questions as we go along, please write them in the chat. I won't be able to see them as they pop up, but Alex will interject and allow me to answer any questions or modify as necessary. I do like getting questions as they come. So as I'm talking about something and you have the question about that topic, I do like to answer it. Then I just feel like it is much more conversational and doesn't leave me wondering until the end when I answer a lot of questions. We can have a lot more chat and dialogue towards the end of class, just to recap and just to answer any remaining questions. But please, as you have something in your mind, type it into the chat and I will get to it whenever I'm told there's a pause and there can be time for me to answer it. So this is herbs for stress, anxiety, and sleep. And it's really natural therapies, concentrating on herbs and nutrition. And I've taught this class before. I've modified it slightly to make sure that I'm talking about things that are more accessible to you. I know that we're all at home. It's a little harder to get certain groceries. You might not be able to access some of the herbs that I'm talking about. I don't mean to be tone deaf and be talking about an herb and you're like, okay, like really right now that's kind of hard to get a hold of. Some of the information, put it in your back pocket for later. When Foxhaven starts the herb CSA or when online ordering, you can get things delivered a little sooner. So just note that I've adapted as much as possible to things you can find in your kitchen and you can whip up with what you might have in the back of your pantry. But I also want to mention some herbs that are really supportive, but also might not be as easy to find these days. My company is called Where the Good Grows. I'm local to the Washington, D.C. area. I work one-on-one with clients, so I do herbal consultations. Both using herbalism and nutrition as the tools in my tool belt to help people with their health goals. And what that looks like is it's usually in person. I have shifted that to be more online, but I get an understanding of your full health history and I'm able to put a full protocol together, both using medicinal herbs and nutrition to customize therapeutic products for you. I do have an online store on wherethegoodgrows.com that has a lot of medicinal herbal products that are a lot more fun and easy to incorporate in your day, that are family friendly. So herbal teas and some of the things that we'll be working with today. So that is a good place to access some of the herbs or some of the ingredients that I might be talking about today and seem a little out of reach. I do have a pretty good inventory there. So this isn't the purpose to really sell things, but I do want to make sure we're having fun, we're entertaining our family that's in close quarters, we're supporting ourselves, we're doing some self-care. But I really think fun and play are a large part of reducing stress and anxiety and therefore can help for a restful sleep. So this is really a culinary herbalism class, meaning using what we have in the kitchen as much as possible and then incorporating some herbalism, some medicinal plants into the repertoire to kind of take the normal nutrition to a whole nother level. When I say the word herbs as a herbalist, that is a catch-all term for any plant that has a medicinal property or properties. So for example, I have ginger right here. This is fresh ginger root I picked up at the grocery store. Ginger is considered a medicinal plant. When we have ground ginger, many of us call that a spice. It's in our spice cabinet or spice rack. it is still considered an herb when I use that general term. So just in case, as I'm saying, that term, and I'm referring to a lot of things that you consider food or spices, it's a catch-all term in herbalism for any plant that has medicinal properties that has been studied and defined and or traditionally used over time. So yes, so that's what an herbalist does. I know we're all coming from different backgrounds and different levels of knowledge. So in general, an herbalist uses plants that have medicinal properties in therapeutic doses, so higher doses than you typically can get just in food, and uses them with clients to support their health goals, and using them in, again, therapeutic doses. And that can mean a lot of different types of formulations. Some of those we will talk about today, and we'll even make them. Herbalism is not that scary. I know I used to be in corporate, used to work in the corporate world. I've definitely done a big shift to becoming an herbalist and having that be my business now, my full-time job. And I know back then when I was in that conventional corporate world, I thought herbalism and herbs in general were a little woo-woo, a little weird. And, I always had concerns about, the herbal products not being FDA approved and all that stuff. I've come to learn that it really is organically grown plants for the most part, or I would recommend you get herbal remedies that are using organically grown plants. And it's really just using plants as medicine. And there's a lot of studies. I would like there to be even more research, but a lot of the studies are very helpful, and also a lot of the therapeutic use over time data. So a lot of the traditional uses that have been used and kind of proven over time is what we study. So let's get started. We're going to make a few things. I'm also going to do some talking. We're going to start off by making a medicinal strength tea. So just an herbal tea, completely caffeine free. And we're going to use some herbs, and I'll talk about those. We're going to make a botanical latte. This has been a savior for me, and I know a lot of my clients have really been enjoying their botanical lattes in the morning. We all miss coffee shops a lot. So this is a fun way to whip up a little latte for yourself that is going to support anxiety, going to help your immune system. I will throw in the immune system supporting plants as we talk. Just a fun way to start your day and give yourself a little time to yourself. Maybe that's your little me time. You wake up early, and the kids maybe haven't gotten up, or whenever you can fit in some of these little rituals. So think about that. You got your medicinal strength tea. Tea is also a really wonderful way to have a ritual. I know when I start to do the preparation for a tea, and I go through the motions of boiling the water and getting my herbs and picking out what herbs are going to be in my tea, my body starts to relax. It's conditioned at this point to see that making of the tea as a ritual to start to get into a calmer state. So I'm not going to really talk about what I'm sure you've seen plenty of articles of how to reduce anxiety as far as using meditation and breathing techniques and yoga and all the wonderful things. This is going to be focused on stress, anxiety, and sleep from the standpoint of using nutrition and herbs. But, using tea and that being a ritual can be a trigger for your body, just like, a meditative practice can. And then lastly, we're going to make an herbal mocktail. It does not have any alcohol in it, hence the name mocktail, but if you wanted to sprinkle a little in there, I wouldn't judge. So the herbal mocktail is going to be using medicinal plants, and so it's super healthy and supportive for you, and also fun. And we will talk about how to make that even great for children and help them fall asleep as well. So I will be throwing in tidbits about helping with stress, anxiety, and sleep for children as well. All right, so let's start by making something. We're going to start by making our medicinal strength tea. I make my tea using a French press. This is usually used for coffee. I have a dedicated French press just for my tea, and that's mainly because the oils from the coffee, even though you can do a really good washing, they still kind of will be residual in this. So I make sure to have a dedicated one for my herbal tea, and so it doesn't taste like coffee. So we're gonna make the tea using fresh ginger root. And then I have 2 herbs here that I'll talk about when I add them in. Ginger is not necessarily like calming. That's not one of its main properties. But I'm putting it in because it's something that we all have, and it actually is really immune supportive. And we all know it's also great for digestion. It's wonderful for reducing inflammation. What I'm doing is I'm just cutting off one of the fingers of the ginger root, and I'm not taking off the skin. That's an extra step that's not really needed because we're making a tea. I am going to encourage, if you're not taking off the skin like I'm doing, that you do buy organic ginger. You just want to make sure that you've washed it well and that you're using organic ginger if you're not taking off the skin. So I'm using a microplane to just finely grate the ginger. If you wanted to cut it up with a knife, that's fine too. Being finely grated, it gets a little more surface area, a little more access to the water. So you just get a little more potent brew. And so again, I'm using ginger because it supports the immune system, and I want to have a component of that in my tea. And this is kind of a little brief lesson on how I blend a medicinal tea. So if I work with a client and I understand all their health needs, their health concerns, maybe one of them might be they want to strengthen their immune system. So I'll put one herb or more into their formulation, into their tea, that supports their immune system. So in this case, maybe ginger is my immune supporting, anti-inflammatory, digestion supporting herb plant that's in my tea. So if you can see that, I've got about a half a teaspoon. If you wanted to do a full teaspoon, it would be much more potent. Really, this is a taste preference. We're going to add other herbs. So for adding other herbs and not just having this be a ginger tea, I did about a half teaspoon. What you could do is just pour hot water over this now and have a lovely ginger tea. You could stop there if ginger is all you have. I'm going to introduce 2 other herbs to you to give you some more options and also teach a little more about tea blending. So this one is holy basil. It's also called Tulsi basil. It is in the basil family. It's wonderfully smelling. I wish there was smell-o-vision, but it's a green plant. It very much looks like basil. It can grow wonderfully around here. This is actually from my garden. And it is super calming. It's wonderful for stress, anxiety. It is part of a class of herbs, so a group of herbs that is called the adaptogens. So it's an adaptogenic herb. And what that means is it helps the body regulate cortisol, which is one of our stress hormones. Stress hormone that is produced by the adrenal glands, which are right above your kidneys. And I think we're all at this point getting to a point where we've had high cortisol levels chronically. We've had a high cortisol levels over a longer period of time because of what's going on in the world today, most likely, and the situation at home for you possibly. And you don't want that. You don't want high cortisol over a long period of time. That can lead to health issues. So, and we know that stress is underlying a lot of health issues. So what we want to do is allow our bodies to adapt to stress better. So that's what adaptogens do. Help your body adapt to stress a little bit better. What does that mean? It means, chemically it's helping your body regulate those cortisol levels. But how I like to explain it is it allows you to bounce back a little bit better. So yes, it doesn't make the stress go away. It doesn't mean you're not going to feel a little bit of anxiety, but it actually allows your body to just regulate that better, control it better, and get back in action, get over it a little bit faster. Not deal with those emotions, but kind of just get back to homeostasis a little bit quicker. Allows you to bounce back better. And so this is just one of many herbs that are in that family of adaptogens. I'm going to introduce one more a little bit later, but let's add a little bit of our holy basil into our tea. So back to formulating. If I was working with a client, I would be including this to help with anxiety, to help them adapt to stress better. It actually has so many medicinal properties. All of the plants that I'll be talking about today have so many medicinal properties if you wanted to dig in. These plants usually have a multitude of uses and a multitude of well-researched ways that they're used. For example, Tulsi also is wonderful at regulating blood sugar. So for anyone pre-diabetic or diabetic, it's wonderful for balancing blood sugar levels, helping people as a tool to regulate their blood sugar levels. But I'm going to again focus on their properties that are more anxiety, stress, and sleep related. So we've added our holy basil, and that's the component that's again helping with stress, anxiety. Like I said, it grows wonderfully around here. I know that's one where you're like, well, I don't have holy basil in my cupboard right now. But something to look out for because it will grow wonderfully over the summer. So if you have a gardener friend, or I know that Foxhaven will have it as part of their CSA, just definitely one to look out for. And it's also pretty available if you're looking at herbal sources online. All right, next is oat straw. So this actually comes from the oat plant, just like our oatmeal. Oatmeal grows on a grass, so oat is a grass, and at the very top eventually develops what we know as the oat that we eat for breakfast. But what oat straw is that grass that grows pretty high and ultimately forms the oat that we know of as our oatmeal. So we're using the grass, and typically humans can't digest grass. We couldn't eat this like we eat the oatmeal. So we're going to be using it in tea. So we're able to get all the nutritional benefits of the oat straw by infusing it into water. The water will take in the medicinal properties of all of the plants that we're using here. So water being our extraction mechanism. Oat straw actually has 4 times more the nutrients than oatmeal itself. So putting the oat straw in our tea, we're getting 4 times more the nutritional benefits. So we're getting magnesium, we're getting really great minerals of all sorts. And so this is going to be both immune supportive in a way, but also like helping with any depleted minerals. It's great for anxiety. It's really a nervine. It helps the nervous system just calm down. I actually can feel this one, especially, and the Tulsi. You just can feel it pretty much right away, coating the nervous system, really soothing you. Oatmeal, you probably notice it kind of does the same. I actually don't like eating oatmeal in the morning because it can kind of make me a little tired. And we'll talk a little bit more about why oatmeal and some foods can make you sleepier and maybe shifting those to be nighttime. So we are making a calming anti-anxiety tea. So this is a perfect addition to our tea. So I'm going to add my oat straw. It may look like I added a lot, but it's really just because the Tulsi basil is pretty big. I usually just try to cover the bottom of my French press. So now we're going to add some hot water. All right, we added hot water. We put the lid back on of our French press. And what I'll typically do is I'll grab a towel and I will put the towel through the handle here so that it's covered so that it stays hotter longer. And our point here was to make a medicinal strength tea. So that means starting with loose herbs versus a tea bag. And not that tea bags are wrong, and you know, I use those definitely when I'm on the go. But by covering the tea like I've just done, there's no way that the steam can escape. You know, it's going to be kept hot for a much longer period of time, and there's a lid on it, it's covered. This allows the plants to, a lot of things. It allows the plants to steep longer, so you're getting all of their nutritional benefits. The fact that there's no steam coming out, I'm keeping the steam within the container, that actually is allowing the volatile oils of the plants to stay in my container. So when you're having a tea bag in a tea mug, you have the steam coming out. That's both releasing heat, so less heat for the herbs to steep fully. And then also those volatile oils are releasing some of the good stuff. The steam is releasing some of the volatile oils. So volatile oils contain a lot of the good stuff, a lot of the medicinal properties of the plants. So this is going to keep it hotter faster. It's going to keep those volatile oils in. And then also, since it's loose leaf, it's the water is getting full access to the herbs. So there's a lot more surface area of the herb contacting the water versus if you're using a tea ball. Tea ball crunches up the herbs a lot. So this way, all the herbs are getting good access to the water. Now, normally, based on the herbs that I used, especially the oat straw, I would want to steep this for a good amount of time. It always scares people when I say I want to steep this for hours, because the oat straw, to get all those minerals that we talked about before, it would need a little more time to extract. So you might actually want to leave this overnight for 8 hours. In the morning, just leaving it like this on your kitchen counter, in the morning, it won't be hot anymore, but you will have a very potent brew. Then you can just push down your lid, take off your towel, and pour it into a pot on the stove and heat it up. Then you have wonderful tea ready to go in the morning that is a super infusion. That's called the infusion method, when you're letting it go for hours. 8 hours is the sweet spot. Doing it any more than 8 hours, you're not going to get much more benefit. You've really extracted all you can out of the herbs. Any less than 8 hours, totally fine to drink, just may not have all the minerals especially. We'll have a lot of the medicinal properties, but maybe not all the minerals that are in the oat straw. So if I just did ginger and Tulsi basil as my tea, then you can easily drink that within 20 minutes. Get the soothing effects of the Tulsi basil, get the wonderful immune boosting and anti-inflammatory effects of the ginger, and go along on your way. So really the super infusion would be for certain herbs, in this case the herb that is the oat straw that has high mineral content. If you've heard of nettles, they grow wonderfully around here. They're growing in my garden right now. Nettles are also very, very mineral rich, and they would be another example of a plant that you would want to do a super infusion. So that 8 hour steep. So when I'm ready, I push that down. So let's say it's steeped for about 20 minutes. I push this down and I'm ready to pour. All right, so this would be the time that you get to drink. Is there a question?
Yep. Someone wants to know, does holy basil need to be dried?
No, not at all. Holy basil is wonderful as fresh herb. It can be made as a tea, so just as I did it, but the fresh, readily picked out of your garden herb, pour the hot water over it, and you have wonderful holy basil tea. You can also make a cold version of holy basil tea, since it usually grows like when it gets pretty hot here. Just put the holy basil into something like this or into a mason jar, put cold water on top, and you're going to want that to infuse for at least an hour or two to get a good flavor of your water, but that would be a cold infusion of holy basil, and you can serve that cold. That's lovely. And then holy basil can even be used like basil on your food. So any way you use basil, holy basil can be used as well. So it's edible and as a fresh herb.
Excellent. And one more question. Any tips for brewing if you don't have a French press?
Yeah, I just really like to introduce the French press method because it's my preferred method. And if I really want people to get the medicinal properties of a tea, because tea is often part of a protocol, I do it this way. A tea ball is totally fine. If you have loose leaf tea, that would be another alternative. You can also take a big mason jar and do exactly what I did. Put all your loose herbs into the mason jar. You're going to want to, here's a mason jar, for example. You do want to put a lid. That's like a pretty key part as far as what I mentioned before, keeping the volatile oils in, keeping the water as hot as possible for as long as possible. So that's another way. You would just need a way to strain out the herbs when you're ready to pour it into your mug. So that could be a metal strainer, anything that has kind of a smaller opening so that you're not losing or you're not, you're straining out all the herbs properly. So you could do the jar method with some sort of cover on it. Tea balls are fine. And then, of course, tea bags. Just one note on tea bags, just make sure you are getting your tea bags from a good source. A lot of tea bags can contain plastics, so they'll use plastics. It's not all fabric. And so some of that plastic is getting into your tea. You know, you're putting hot water on plastic, and some of the residual chemicals are going into your tea. So you want to make sure you're buying tea bags from a company where they are using fully all cloth organic tea bags, and then you also want to make sure that your tea in general is grown organically. So if we're trying to use this to promote our health, we don't want them to have used chemicals in the growing process. And also you should know that to dry herbs quickly, and a lot of these companies that are doing the tea bag method, they want to get these herbs dried quickly and then put them into tea bags. They will spray them often with chemicals, the same kind of pesticides and stuff to dry them faster. So it's not just that they might have used chemicals in the growing process, they might also use chemicals to do a faster drying. And then the herbs are recently coated in chemicals when put into your tea. So those are things to work. I'm not trying to scare you, but there are some really good companies out there that if you read the boxes, they will say that the herbs are organic, and they mean both grown organically, and they're not allowed to spray anything on them ever during the processing. And then they'll talk about the tea bag components.
Thank you. We have a follow-up question. If using a mason jar, do you have to put the cover on tight?
Yes, yeah, I mean, it won't hurt to put it on tight, but as long as it's covered and you don't see steam coming out.
Perfect, thank you.
Mm-hmm. These are good questions. I love questions because they really gauge where you guys are. I don't get to see faces and, you know, read body language, so that's really wonderful. Thank you. All right, so we made our tea, and you just press this down and you can pour it. What I'm going to do instead is help you to make the most potent, medicinally helpful botanical latte, and we're going to use our herbal tea that we already made as a base for that latte. So the botanical latte is going to be basically a turmeric latte. Some of you might have seen coffee shops getting on the turmeric latte trend, but it's going to include a lot of other medicinal plants in addition to turmeric, which is wonderful. So let's get started on making that. I don't know if you can see it. I have a blender right next to me, so I will have to use that very briefly, and that might be a little loud, so we'll like pause and you can get maybe some questions typed in during that time. I'm going to do this in two methods because I know not everyone has a high-speed blender. A high-speed blender is pretty nice to make the froth happen. I'm not really blending anything that actually needs to be chopped up or anything like that. Like I don't need it for the chopping capabilities. I'm just really using it for the frothing, and that's why the high speed really helps. It like froths it up a lot. So if you just have a regular blender, it won't be as helpful and won't froth as much. So I'm going to tell you another version that anyone can make regardless of the tools you have. You'll definitely be able to make the version where we can make it in a bowl. So I'm going to do 2 methods of the same botanical latte and explain the herbs as I go. So first method is the blender method. I like botanical lattes, and that just means basically using these herbs, which are basically super foods. I like to do lattes in the morning instead of a smoothie. And I do that all year long. If I do have smoothies, I would have them towards the middle of the day in the summertime, just as a way to cool my body off and get some extra nutrition in. Botanical lattes are wonderful in the morning because they're warm. And when your body wakes up, you're actually wanting to put warm things in your body. Your body temperature doesn't want to be shocked by something really cold like a smoothie in the morning. So this is something that is a wonderful alternative to a smoothie. It's just as easy to make, and your body's going to thank you to have that nourishing, warm beverage in the morning. It's very similar. You've probably heard people mention that having warm water in the morning is a little bit better and is better received by your body than shockingly cold water in the morning. So we're, this is based in Ayurveda. Ayurveda is the study of medicine in India, and has been around for 5,000 years. They are big proponents of something warm and nourishing in the morning. So we're going to use a turmeric mixture that I have pre-blended. After this call, I'm going to have Foxhaven send you the recipe for making this pre-blended spice mix. It's a lot of things you already have in your cabinet, and I'll talk about the breakdown of what they are, but I pre-blend this mixture, and I would recommend you pre-blend it too, because if I were to put each and every separate spice or herb into my blender separately versus pre-blending, the measurements get really small. So it would be like less than a quarter teaspoon and stuff like that. So I give you the recipe to make a little jar of this yourself, and you can keep this on your counter and take a teaspoon of it every time you want to make your latte. So I'm not going to be giving the measurements as I go right now, because I'm just going to make this latte as if you were making it in the morning for yourself, taking a scoop of your mixture and then moving right along. So look forward to that. I'll be sending other little fun tips and tricks and recipes and stuff after this call. So we're going to start by putting a teaspoon of our botanical latte mix, and this includes turmeric. Turmeric is a root very similar to ginger. I mean, it looks very similar to ginger. It's a rhizome, and we all know it to be very anti-inflammatory, which is wonderful because often when we're stressed, inflammation is often part of the whole what your body goes through, and so we need to be reducing inflammation, as stress can cause inflammation during this time. Turmeric also has been studied when used in high doses, so when used therapeutically, not just sprinkled in your food here and there, but it can actually help with depression, helps lift the mood, helps address the high cortisol spikes that we were talking about earlier. So turmeric is known for so many things, not just inflammation. So we're using it to both help with inflammation and to be mood supportive, and also support the immune system. So we have turmeric in here. We have spices that you can find in your spice cabinet: clove, nutmeg, allspice, just a little bit of allspice. ground ginger. These are all things that are actually typically in a pumpkin spice. So turmeric is the addition, but all those other spices that I mentioned are the primary pumpkin spice. So what you could do, and I'm not going to do it now, but in the fall when you really have your pumpkin spice cravings, you can add pumpkin puree just out of the can that you buy at the grocery store, like you would make a pumpkin pie with. Add a tablespoon of pumpkin puree to what I'm about to make, so to this whole recipe, and you'll have a pumpkin spice latte that is super medicinal. And pumpkin is very, very healthy for you, especially when you're using all real ingredients versus, the coffee shops are using syrups and sweeteners and flavoring and stuff like that. So we have in here also, we have ashwagandha. And ashwagandha is also a root. This is the root, but in powdered form. So it's kind of like a white root when it's powdered. And ashwagandha is an adaptogen, so very similar and in the same class and category as the holy basil that we talked about before. So it's wonderful for supporting our stress response, helping us bounce back faster. It's also great for anxiety. It really calms the nervous system. It's a nervine in that sense. It calms the nervous system. It's also great to increase focus. I think we all could use a little bit of that right now as we're working from home and trying to get used to a new normal in our day. So it helps with increasing focus, and it also is wonderful for insomnia. So as we start to talk a little more about helpful remedies for sleep, ashwagandha is one of those as well. So ashwagandha is something you want to use daily. There are certain herbs where you want to use them for a period of time to address a certain health issue, and then stop when that health issue is no longer. Ashwagandha, and actually a lot of adaptogens are like this. You want to take them daily because they actually nourish and support your body and build up over time to really see the effects. So you will feel an effect as far as just being relaxing, feeling very nourished. But really over time, it's strengthening your body over time. So there's a saying that ashwagandha every day gives you the strength of a horse. And that's an old saying and silly, but it's a reminder that actually using it every day will increase strength and endurance. There are a lot of bodybuilders that will use ashwagandha for that purpose, but how I use it with clients is anyone that has really been struck down by illness and needs to get that strength back again, needs to get back in action, this works wonders in that scenario. And you don't even have to be in that state. If you are thriving and doing great, this is only going to help support you and take you to another level. So it's also wonderful for the thyroid. So in the case of hypothyroidism, it is particularly good and effective for hypothyroidism, not hyperthyroidism. So in this blend already is our ashwagandha. Also in this blend is astragalus. Astragalus is a very immune supportive herb. It is not as helpful as far as anxiety. I mean, it's not helpful, but that's not one of its strengths. Its main strength is to be immune supportive, really strengthen the immune system, but in a way that your immune system is modulated and not overly kicked into action. So there are certain herbs where at the first sign of infection or the first sign of illness, you're going to want to really boost the immune system so that it can charge and take action, right? You want to really build up the army. Those are herbs you only want to take in those first signs of health issues, because you don't want to always be in a hyper alert state. And those kind of herbs, what I'm talking about, are antibiotic in nature. I mean, there are herbs that actually are antibacterial or antiviral. So those herbs are when that, is needed. And it's kind of like the antibiotic that you might be prescribed. You really want to take it for that time that's needed, let it do its job, and then, stop use of those antibiotics. Mainly just because you don't want your immune system in overdrive or in that hyper alert state for a prolonged period of time. It's not doing you any good. But something like, this is ashwagandha, but the herb that I'm talking about is astragalus. Astragalus is a gentle but strong, and I know that sounds not right, but it's modulating your immune system. It's bringing it to where it is supposed to be. So if you are a little bit weakened in your immune system, and a lot of us are, we might be nutritionally depleted in some way, it brings it right where it should be to be at normal level. And it's not going to put it in hyperdrive. Now that's great for someone who has an autoimmune disease. So an autoimmune disease, you have a hyper-reactive immune system. And you don't want to put yourself in a state where your immune system is on high alert too many times, right? So you definitely want to be taking immune modulating herbs like astragalus, and not kind of putting, like echinacea would be one, where you have to be a little careful if you have an autoimmune disease, because that's one of those herbs that kicks your immune system into gear and kind of is in that overdrive. Not that that's bad, that's wonderful when you have the health issue going on. So astragalus is one that you want to take daily to keep your immune system strong as your first line of defense. So maybe you never need to take the echinacea or whatever, really immune boosting herbs. So in this mix is already the ashwagandha, which we talked about, our adaptogen, the astragalus, our immune supporting powerhouse. Astragalus is from Chinese medicine, traditional Chinese medicine, but it can also be grown around here and grown locally. So I'm able to find great organic sources. So we already have all that in that teaspoon that I put into the blender. In addition to the teaspoon of our herb mix, we're going to add a tablespoon of coconut oil.
Hold on, we have a couple of questions about the herb mix.
Yes.
So one is, does it need to be refrigerated or can it be left on the counter, and how long does it last?
So this herb mix is like any of the spices in your spice cabinet in the sense that it does not need to be refrigerated. It wouldn't help if it were refrigerated. Store it how you would, turmeric, like the turmeric that's in your spice cabinet. These herbs, since they've been dried very well and have been processed in a way that they're supposed to be, able to last a while, they definitely will last in this form for at least 2 years and be very medicinally potent. After that, just kind of like the spices in your spice cabinet, they start to lose potency, and they're still fine to use. They won't make you sick or anything, but you do want to just kind of make sure about 2 years is like the sweet spot for using them and getting the most out of them.
And let's see. The other question is, how do you use astragalus in its root form? Do you cut it into short strips, or, are there other?
So astragalus will look, and I just don't have it with me right now. Astragalus will look very much like ashwagandha in the sense that you can buy it already in the ground root form, so it's powdered. You can also buy it in dried already in chunks. So in the case of making your herb mix, you want to buy it powdered already. But if you had astragalus in its dried root form and in chunks of the root, you can make a lovely tea, very potent tea with it. And in that case, since it's a root, you would want to boil the root in water. So not like the method I just made right here. To really get the most out of that root, you'd want to boil the water for a little while and then simmer it for about, however long you want to simmer. And that's called a decoction. So you can look up the decoction method, or I can send that out. But that's kind of overcomplicating what I'm talking about right now. But for a root like ashwagandha, if you got it in root chunks, you would want to do a decoction if you were just making it separately as a tea to support your immune system. I think the best way to use it is in powder form. You're getting to eat the whole root. It's just been dried and powdered. And so putting it in its powdered form through the way we're making this latte, you're really getting all the benefits of it. You're eating the root just like you're eating ginger, or you can eat the whole root of turmeric.
And someone asked, I've heard that black pepper helps the absorption and efficacy of turmeric. Does the mixture contain any, or should we add?
So that is a wonderful question. There's 2 ways to activate turmeric. And activating turmeric, which means curcumin, is so far what has been recognized as the main medicinal component in turmeric. It's called curcumin. And so when you're activating turmeric, you're basically activating the curcumin in turmeric. You're really giving the turmeric what it needs to make that curcumin truly be absorbed by your body. So you're making it bioavailable by your body. So the 2 ways to make turmeric activated is black pepper, and the other way is fat. So I just added coconut oil to our smoothie, and that was to activate, well, for many reasons. That's to activate the turmeric. So in the mixture, I do not have black pepper. I'm using the fat to activate the turmeric. And I didn't put black pepper. I mean, that would be a fine addition if you wanted to make your version. Black pepper is wonderful as an addition to a lot of different herbal preparations, because black pepper is a good activator. It not only activates turmeric, but it can activate other herbs, and it also really helps with digestion. So it helps your body absorb the herbal preparation or the food better. It's traditionally why we put black pepper on the top of our food. Traditionally, it has been found that it helps us absorb the food better, absorb the nutrients better. So black pepper is wonderful. It can be a little harsh for some people. So I'm just trying to make this blend something that everybody likes. Not everybody likes the taste of the black pepper. Sometimes in the morning, it's a little much. So I left the black pepper out, and I am using the coconut oil as our fat source to activate the curcumin in the turmeric.
Excellent. And one more question. Is there a substitute for clove if anyone has an allergy?
You just leave it out. The blend has, I forgot to mention before, it has cinnamon in it as well, and I will give you the full recipe, but just leave the clove out. Clove is wonderful in the sense that it is super high in antioxidants. We all know we should be getting a good amount of antioxidants in our diet. Clove is actually one of the highest sources. So there is a measure for level of antioxidants. It's called the ORAC score, and it is actually the highest in ORAC score among all foods, all spices, all medicinal plants. So just a little clove goes a long way as far as getting those antioxidants, but totally leave it out if it doesn't work for you. Any of these things can be left out, and you won't necessarily miss the taste.
Perfect. Thank you.
Anything else?
That's all for now. Oh, here's one. How much fat is needed to activate turmeric? Would making it a non-dairy milk that contains a few grams of fat be enough?
So it really doesn't take much fat to activate the turmeric. It's a little bit like how much are you using in proportion to how much fat you're using. When you cook with turmeric, you usually start out with ghee or some sort of oil like olive oil, And so when you're cooking, you're automatically using a fat, most likely, or you're putting coconut milk in your turmeric creation. So you're usually, activating it without knowing, or you're maybe putting the black pepper in. In this case, I'm putting a tablespoon of the coconut oil to activate the turmeric, but also I chose a tablespoon because the nut milks and like the plant-based milks, they actually don't contain a lot of fat. And if I really want this this latte to foam, so we were trying to like replace our latte from the coffee shop, I want it to foam up a lot. The fat is needed to make the frothiness happen. So I'm putting a good amount, a tablespoon, to help with frothing and to also activate the turmeric. But I don't know if there's I probably could look it up. There's probably an exact fat to turmeric ratio. But really a little bit of fat is all that's really needed to kind of get that activation going. But yeah, plant-based milks, they are hard to get to foam when you don't have professional equipment like they do at the coffee shops. So we're using the fat to help us get the foam going, get the frothiness for our latte. And also coconut oil is a wonderful source of a healthy fat. And a lot of times when I work with clients who are having issues with anxiety or really just feeling kind of wired all the time, I often look at their diet to see if they have enough healthy fat. Our nervous system really needs fat. Our brain is mostly made of fat. I mean, it's mostly just fat. So our brain really needs good quality fats. I think a lot of us know now the whole non-fat diet has been demystified and debunked, and it's definitely not the way to go. So we want good sources of fat. So we're considering doing this latte in the morning as our morning ritual. So we want to feed our brain. We want to get that good source of fat. So a little bit can come. I'm going to be using a plant-based milk. A little bit of that can come from your plant-based milk, but it depends on, if it's a nut milk or seed milk or oat milk. And so they all have varying amounts of fat and usually not too much. So the latte can also serve as breakfast. So I'm trying to make sure that it has all the things, fat, fiber, all of your good components, some protein, stuff like that. So so that's also another reason for the fat, to kind of give you a little sense of fullness and get you on your way and energized and your brain getting fed in the morning. So we have our coconut milk, about a tablespoon. Next, we're gonna add our plant-based milk. So this can be any milk of choice. If you do dairy, or if you wanna do goat milk, those are lovely options. I am using an oat milk. So I actually am not repping this brand or anything, but I do wanna say a little word about plant-based milks. I like this brand, it's called Elmhurst. As far as I like their oat milk, because we talked about the oats in our tea earlier. The way they are producing this oat milk is actually getting a lot more of the medicinal properties of the oat plant. So I like that in the sense of how they're making it. And then their ingredients are filtered water, whole grain oats, and salt. They don't add any additives, so they don't add any emulsifiers, any gums, any resins to make sure it doesn't separate and keep it shelf stable and all that stuff. And they're also not adding all of the supplements, the vitamins. I don't know how they necessarily get away with that, because usually plant-based milks, you'll see they're adding supplemental vitamins so that it looks like and has the nutritional profile similar to dairy milk. I don't know how they're getting away with not having to add those supplements, but I support that they have not added them. Usually all of those additives and then the extra, vitamin A and D and all that stuff that they're adding, they're using the bottom of the shelf versions of those supplements. A lot of times your body doesn't fully recognize them as the vitamins that they are. I would totally recommend getting those vitamins in their whole food form, so in your diet, versus relying on your plant-based milk. So I don't really like a lot of those additives. They are ultimately chemicals. So I like that clean brand. So I'm using about a cup of the oat milk. This oat milk would be something that I warmed on the stove in a little pot on the stove. So morning routine would be to make my tea, have it hot, and make my oat milk or whatever plant-based milk or whatever type of dairy milk you like, have that warm on the stove. So you want your two components, your tea and your oat milk, to be warm. So I'm adding a cup of the oat milk and a half cup of the tea. All right, we're gonna pretend like that was a half cup of tea. So both of those components were hot. That will melt your coconut oil. If you want to add a little bit of sweetener, you can add your maple syrup, or you can add a raw honey. Just a little bit to sweeten it up. Doesn't have to be, that's all up to you. Just a note for my coffee lovers out there who think I am taking coffee away from them. I like to use tea in a way, in the sense that I'm getting so many more herbs in there. But I will say that this turmeric latte mix tastes wonderful with coffee. So instead of the tea, the half cup of tea I put in, you could put the half cup of coffee that you have just brewed so it's still hot. It makes a wonderful coffee turmeric latte. Very frothy, very yummy. So if you want to, do coffee instead of tea, I support that. Just watch on caffeine intake, because caffeine really can be a source of anxiety. I think we all know the real source of our anxiety right now is not necessarily, coffee's fault. So, if coffee is comforting to you, go for it. So I'm going to blend this up. You would want to blend it for a full minute on the highest speed that your blender goes. I'm going to, pretend and do this a little bit shorter, so it might not turn out as frothy, but give me a moment and maybe send in some questions, and I will be right back after some loud noise. All right. We spilled a little bit, but we're good. Okay, any questions as I pour this and you can see some froth? Again, it would be frothier if I was doing it longer, but I don't want to waste your time just blending in front of you. So you can see a little bit of frothiness. I don't know if you can see that, but we have a nice frothy latte. All that would not take very long in the morning. Another note on plant-based milks, especially since right now, you go to the grocery store and not everything's fully stocked up like it usually is. It is so easy to make plant-based milks, and it is a wonderful way to avoid the fillers and additives and the supplements that they put in them. So one extra step, do it in a day where you have some time, but to make oat milk, it's just rolled oats. So not the steel cut oats, but like rolled oats. You want it to be like the old fashioned kind, not the instant oats. Rolled oats, a cup of rolled oats, and to 4 cups of water, and that will make a batch. So you use your blender and you put the 1 cup of rolled oats and the 4 cups of cold water. You blend it for just 30 seconds. You don't want to go longer than 30 seconds because that will cause a lot of, oats kind of get that sliminess. It will cause a little more sliminess. So you'll kind of get the perfect batch of your oat milk, and you can leave that in the fridge. It's usually good for about 5 days. It will separate in the fridge, so have it in a jar where you can shake it before you use it. So you can use that, heat that up in the morning instead of buying your oat milk. My other favorite plant-based milk is hemp milk. Oh, sorry, one note on the oat milk. You will need to strain out the oats so that you don't have a clumpy, lumpy oat milk mixture. You'll need to use maybe like a fine mesh sieve, something that can help you strain out the oats and separate it from your ultimate oat milk. Hemp milk, however, is my other favorite, and you don't have to strain out the hemp seeds. They are so little and they combine so well. If you are using a high-speed blender, they will completely be invisible within your milk. You'll have a wonderful milk. It's not chunky. And so hemp milk, and I'll send out these recipes, but the ratio is 1/2 cup hemp seeds to 4 cups water. And blend that for a whole minute in your blender, and you have wonderful hemp milk. It also will separate. It also lasts about 5 days in the fridge. Shake it and you're good to go. If you want to use your hemp milk or your oat milk in cereal, or instead of just the latte, you might want to add a date to sweeten it up a little bit of vanilla extract, maybe a pinch of salt. That will flavor it up a little bit. I tend to not flavor it at all because I'm going to use it in my latte or use it in cooking of some sort, and I flavor the cooking, but that's up to you. So we have our latte, and we did the quick version here. Now I'm just going to make it quickly, same ingredients, but I'm going to tell you how you would do it on the stove. So you can use a pot, you can use a cereal bowl. Basically, you're going to make this how people make a matcha latte. So you add your 1 teaspoon of your latte mix. You add your hot tea. Again, this can be hot coffee. All of the measurements will be sent to you. Mix the tea with your mixture. This is a matcha whisk. It's a bamboo whisk. It's easier than our metal whisks to get all the lumps and stuff. But you can use the back of your spoon. Make sure there's no lumps. You can use a fork. Absolutely not required. You would add a little bit of your coconut milk to some oat milk or whatever plant milk you want, and heat that up on the stove. So separately, add the coconut oil with the oat milk on the stove, and so that the oil melts and the milk is a little hot. And so you got your tea-based mixture here. You can add a little sweetener to your tea-based mixture. So that's maybe your maple syrup or your honey. With your oat milk mixture, this is a handheld frother. I absolutely love it. It's all stainless steel, and it's got a plunger. And this is where you would put your hot oat milk mixture that has the coconut oil in it. Again, coconut oil being in there to help the oat milk froth up, especially your homemade oat milks. It's really great to help them froth up. And so you would put your hot milk mixture in here and plunge it like this, and that would produce really frothy, sometimes even frothier than your blender, frothy milk, and you're good to go. So you would combine, you'd put first your tea mixture into a cup, and then add your frothy milk on top, and you would have a frothy latte. So those are your 2 quick ways. I promise it sounds like a lot of juggling and stuff, but you get the hang of it and it becomes a ritual. So next we're going to talk about, we're going to make a mocktail, and we're going to talk a little bit more about anxiety, and we're going to talk about sleep. But I think I saw another question pop up. Is there another one?
Yeah. So someone asks, what are your thoughts on drinking this latte in the evening before bedtime versus in the morning? Aren't some of the spices like cinnamon considered more heating in Ayurveda?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so it is wonderful for the evening. Anytime you're using the fat, like in the coconut oil and in your plant-based milk, fat is really nourishing. We talked about the ashwagandha being wonderful for insomnia and for helping with sleep. So it really slows the brain down and helps you get ready for bed, but it won't have that same effect in the morning. It's actually funny. It can actually energize you. It adapts to what your body needs when you're taking it. So, but it can be wonderful at night to help with insomnia, especially for people with the busy mind, and that's what's keeping you up. So yeah, this would be wonderful and very warming, like you said. So ginger is in the mixture, and so is cinnamon, and they're very warming, very good to have in the evening. So I am a fan of this either way. I will make this with coffee a lot in the morning, and so I often think about it as the morning drink, but also wonderful at night.
And Erica asks, are there other tea combinations that you might be able to recommend? And maybe you might not have the answer right away, but maybe you could include another recipe.
Oh my gosh. So I do all types of herbal tea, and I will put them in here. So I will say that the latte mix turmeric and the ginger that's in there, and the clove, and like all those spices really take precedence as far as the flavor. So you really kind of can use any herbal tea base. There's some things I wouldn't like the flavor, like maybe putting a peppermint tea into this latte would taste kind of gross. So use your discretion, but I do all sorts of different herbal tea bases. So I'll make my herbal tea that feels right for that day, for with whatever herbs and properties I'm looking for, and use that as my base for my latte. So go based on what you have in your cabinet, what's available to you. If you have a great herbal tea blend that you've been meaning to use, try it out here. What's coming to mind right now is just maybe peppermint might not taste good, and some herb tea blends will often use peppermint to kind of like meld out the flavors, so look for that. But try and see what you like. Yeah. Yeah.
Perfect.
Also considering time of day. So if you want something sedative, so there's a lot of herbs you can use for sleep that we'll talk about. If you want this to be your sleepy time latte that you have in the evening, like we just talked about, we could create a sleepy time tea and use that as your base. So it's more sedative than the relaxing herbs that we used, which are relaxing but won't, be sedative. You could use one step up and get more sedative herbs as your herbal tea base. Any other questions?
That's all for now. Thank you.
Okay. So we are going to talk about sleep a little bit more, as well as anxiety. There's always sleep, anxiety, and stress. They all interconnect. Stress prolonged over time can lead to anxiety. Anxiety can creep up right away just due to things going on in your life. Anxiety can be a result of nutritional deficiencies. There can be a lot of root causes for anxiety. Same thing with sleep. There can be a lot of root causes, and we're not going to address all of those right now. But a lot of us know that anxiety and the stress of our workday or our daily lives can be a root cause for sleep disruption. So I'm not going to address all the potential root causes of sleep issues, but I will give some helpful tips and tools that can really help with sleep in a natural way. One thing I just mentioned is nutritional deficiencies kind of being a root cause to some anxiety and sleep issues. We all know about turkey at Thanksgiving and how it contains tryptophan. Most people know about the amino acid tryptophan from proteins like turkey, so I introduce it that way. Tryptophan is what our body needs in order to produce melatonin and serotonin. So serotonin, we know that as the feel-good chemical in our bodies, helps to, if you have low serotonin, you might have depression-like symptoms. And melatonin, we know that because that's available in our pharmacy as a natural help for sleep. But tryptophan is something that we can be eating in our diet to allow our body to make the appropriate amounts of melatonin. So we don't actually need to supplement with the melatonin that we find in the pharmacy. We can be eating in a way that helps our body to be producing the appropriate amounts of melatonin. A note on melatonin, I don't recommend that to clients typically because I like to have them go even more natural by helping them boost their tryptophan levels. But melatonin, if you do use that and you find that it does work for you, you really only want to use that for 3 months at a time. It's not meant to be an everyday solution. So that's what I want to provide, is a little bit more solutions that can be daily. You can make a ritual out of. They're totally safe to use for however long you want to use them, and they won't have any chances of you becoming addicted or reliant on these different natural therapies. Melatonin, there is actually some studies saying that there can be a dependence on it. So I think that's why the recommendation is 3 months, stop, you can start up again at a later date. So some things that you can be making sure you have in your diet that not only support sleep, but help calm the nervous system. So really helping with anxiety as well, twofold. So tryptophan foods, tryptophan containing foods, some of the highest sources of tryptophan are proteins like eggs, wild caught fish, pasture-raised meats, walnuts, potatoes, bananas, whole grains like the oats we were talking about before. So oatmeal in the morning, I kind of mentioned this. Check in with your body. It happens, it's different for different people. Oats do not, in the morning, oatmeal does not energize me. It actually makes me kind of sleepy. It's a little heavy. It's so nourishing that it kind of makes me want to just go back into bed and curl up again with my blanket. And that's because it actually contains a lot of tryptophan. So if you like your oats in the morning and that works for you, that's great. Just consider that, hey, something containing oats could be a wonderful dessert, something before bed that makes you a little bit sleepy. So, but any time of day that you're getting these foods into your body, so the eggs and stuff, the eggs aren't going to make you immediately sleepy. So just having a good amount of tryptophan in your body is going to support that sleep-wake cycle, our circadian rhythm. The melatonin, boosting melatonin in the body at the right amount, the right time. So your body knows, okay, it's time to go to sleep, it's time to wake up, and your energy levels are appropriate. Just wanted to mention that the oat straw in our tea is also supporting that. So wanted to mention oats because we use it in our oat milk. We've been talking a lot about oats. So oats are wonderful for anxiety, and then they're also the source of tryptophan. Bananas, another thing that we tend to think as a morning food, but bananas are very high in carbohydrates, and they do contain a lot of tryptophan, and so maybe something, again, to shift to the evening when your body needs to be trained and given a lot more tryptophan to help with sleep. If you don't have sleep issues, then there's no need to be migrating some of these foods to the evening, but they are something that can give you a little more tryptophan right before bed. Another thing as far as nutritional deficiencies that people tend to have if they have a chronic sleep issue is they're deficient in magnesium and they're deficient possibly in calcium. Two things to look out for. I mean, what we all really need to be doing right now is supporting our immune systems by eating the best diet we possibly can. So that's reducing sugar, reducing inflammatory foods, trying to eat whole foods as much as possible. And so we all kind of know that sugar, reduces our immune system, and processed foods as well. And trying to eat a diet that has a lot of magnesium. Magnesium is really high in leafy greens like spinach and Swiss chard. There's a lot of magnesium in chocolate, for example. So looking for dark chocolate, like 70% or higher. Very little sugar if you can find it, sweetened maybe with honey or something more natural versus like processed cane sugar. So yeah, dark chocolate is good for you and contains a lot of magnesium. And same with pumpkin seeds. They have a lot of magnesium. So just boosting the magnesium stores, it doesn't matter when you're eating these foods, boosting magnesium stores will help to let your body get into a relaxing state much better. So really support sleep. There are wonderful supplements as far as magnesium. So if you're really depleted, a magnesium supplement of some sort might be really helpful. I like magnesium in forms that are not going to interrupt not going to have you have loose bowels, because if you get too high of magnesium in your body, you might have some loose bowels. So magnesium glycinate and magnesium taurate, if you're supplementing, those are some forms of magnesium to look for that would not have any issues on loose bowels. And we talked about calcium, trying to get as much calcium into your diet. Often we think of dairy being a great source of calcium, and it is. I know everybody has different diets, so calcium for you through dairy might be a goat milk. I like goat milk kefir. So kefir has been fermented. Often people can have fermented dairy a little bit easier than dairy on its own. So goat milk kefir, or a milk, like a cow milk kefir. And kale actually has a lot of calcium in it, surprisingly. 1 for 1 with milk. I mean, people will often say, well, there's no way kale has a lot of calcium. Actually does. Same amount of kale that you're getting. If you're having the same amount of milk, you're looking pretty good comparatively. So calcium and magnesium help with melatonin production in the body. So that's why I wanted to mention those, and often can be a root cause for some sleep issues. So how do we use not only our diet, but we use some herbs to help us sleep? One thing that's really great for children is tart cherry juice. You can find it in the grocery store. Make sure it is not sweetened artificially in any way. And you want to get tart cherry juice, not just regular like sweet cherry juice. But you'll find it in like health food stores and like Whole Foods and stuff like that. Wonderful, just a little glass of tart cherry juice would be great for kids, because tart cherry juice helps the body produce melatonin. So that would be something you'd want before bed, about an hour before bed, so there's no waking up to have to go to the bathroom. Wonderful for adults too, but totally safe for children. And if you need to add a little honey, so it's not, so it's easier to go down, that's totally fine. And consider things like a banana or something that actually has some carbs, like grains, because we all think like these low carb diets are the way to go, but often they can cause sleep issues, because we do need some of these carbs. I'm talking like healthy whole grains and stuff like that. We do need some carbs to be able to produce, have enough tryptophan, produce the melatonin, have the regular sleep-wake cycles. So if you've gone on a very strict no-carb diet and noticed that sleep has become an issue, that's something to look at. I'm not saying we eat pizza every single meal. I'm just saying introducing a little bit more carbs into your diet might be something to try out. So let's make an herbal latte that is both anti-anxiety and also going to help calm things down to get a better sleep. And let me look at time. We're close to time, so I'm just gonna make this pretty quick for you. We're gonna add a little bit of maple syrup. This is just about a teaspoon. This is gonna make us, oops, let me put it in here so we can shake it up, sorry. We're gonna add a teaspoon of maple syrup. We're going to add a little bit of an infused vinegar. What I mean by that, and this is so easy to make at home, I took apple cider vinegar, let's say in a jar like this. Actually, I can show it to you. This is a jar of an herb called motherwort. Motherwort grows beautifully around here. It is super anti-anxiety, like really zens you out. It's not sedative, so this is again kind of anti-anxiety cocktail. But it really, I mean, enough motherwort in the moment can really even help with a panic attack or an anxiety attack. So this is motherwort that has been infused in an herbal vinegar. And what that means is I filled this jar halfway with motherwort, then I poured organic apple cider vinegar on top, the apple cider vinegar that is full of probiotics because it still has the mother in it. And I let this just sit on my counter, did nothing but let it sit on my counter for a month. Anytime in that month, I could have used this vinegar and it maybe didn't have quite all of the medicinal properties from the motherwort extracted into it. But a month really makes sure that the vinegar has all of the medicinal properties of the herb that you're using to extract. So in here is my herbal vinegar. I've strained out the herb, and it's just the vinegar with the medicinal properties that have been infused into the vinegar. So this is motherwort vinegar, motherwort being super anti-anxiety. That's just one of its herbal properties. It's also so heart healthy, wonderful for reducing anxiety. It has so many other great properties. So I'm adding a tablespoon of the motherwort vinegar. And I'm doing this in a jar where I can add the top on top. Shaking it up. And now I'm going to add some sparkling water. And that's it. You can add some ice if you want. You can add frozen blueberries instead of ice, so you can keep it cold and have it look pretty. Berries of any sort work really nice for that. You could add a sprig of an herb, but because we sweetened it up with maple syrup, you can use raw honey as well. It's kind of like a drinking vinegar. It's like a shrub, if you've heard of a shrub before. So, but it has that motherwort in it, so motherwort is super relaxing. If you wanted to make the same thing, but for children, motherwort would not be, you know, it's just not studied on kids. It's not that it would be horrible, but I wouldn't recommend it as the first choice. You could do the same little cocktail, but put the tart cherry juice in, add a little bit of sweetener, add the sparkling water, and you all have your family cocktails before bed. Again, this is a lot more anti-anxiety. I didn't get to all of the plants that are very sedative, but I do want to mention this wonderful tincture. Again, no affiliation with this company, but it's called Oregon's Wild Harvest. They're a company that grow all of their plants organically. If you have trouble falling asleep or you wake in the middle of the night and you need to get back to sleep easy, a tincture is the best form to take your herbs because it works in 15 minutes. It's liquid versus a capsule, or a capsule would take a while to get into your system. So a tincture is herbs that are typically infused in alcohol, just as the extraction mechanism. You're not really getting a lot of alcohol. So this tincture has 3 wonderful plants that are very sedative and actually help you fall asleep. They are valerian, passion flower, and skullcap. They're also anti-inflammatory. There's like so many wonderful properties. So it's beneficial in more ways than just being sleep supportive. And it will not make you drowsy or anything in the morning. And there's no chance of ever getting hooked on this stuff. So it's something that you can take every night. You can take as you feel you need it. So I just wanted to mention this tincture. There's a lot of other tinctures out there that have these same plants, but they're very wonderful for sleep. And you could always add some of your tincture, your sleep tincture, to your mocktail. It would have a slight amount of alcohol in it because the tincture is an alcohol infusion, but still nowhere near what would be normally in a cocktail. So if you needed to make your mocktail a little sleep supported, you could add some tincture in there too. Sorry, I kind of went pretty fast on the sleep part, but I want to be conscious of time. Any other questions on anything I just talked about?
Yes. Did you use your motherwort dried or fresh?
So I used it dried. I would recommend dried just because fresh, there's a chance that because of the water content that the vinegar could go off, or there might be some mold or issues in your in your 1 month extraction process. So I would recommend whatever plant that you use. Motherwort in this case is what we used. I would use dried just as a beginner. It's much more foolproof.
And what was the name of the tincture called?
And the brand is called Oregon's Wild Harvest, and the actual name of the tincture is called Saw Logs. I don't know if you can see that.
Oh, I can see it.
And I can put a lot of these resources into a resource list that I email out later.
That would be lovely. Let's see. Are there any known interactions between some of the herbs you mentioned, holy basil, ashwagandha, etc., and other types of herbs used for liver detoxing, dandelion, milk thistle, etc.?
Well, to start, the herbs that are used for liver detoxing, which we didn't touch on too much today, those tend to have a little bit of reactions with pharmaceutical drugs, and that's mainly because they are flushing out the liver, they are pushing things through faster, so there's a chance that if you are on a pharmaceutical drug and you take the herbs that are liver detoxing, that it would flush out the the pharmaceutical drug, especially if the drug does a lot of its work in the liver. It will flush out the drug faster than it has time to do what it's meant to do. So it's not necessarily an interaction in a bad way. It just actually would make it so your pharmaceutical drug doesn't get the chance to do what it has been intended to do. So you do not want to use certain detoxification type herbs. That's why you work with the herbalist, because there are some detox herbs that would be totally safe with pharmaceuticals. It would depend on which pharmaceutical you're on. It gets a little complicated in that sense. The herbs I mentioned today, for the most part, are completely fine with all pharmaceutical drugs. That's why I tend to use these herbs and have it, be accessible to everyone and not have to, have all these disclaimers. So I think the reason why I said for the most part is, with kids, I mentioned motherwort is not the choice that I would use for kids. I would go more for like the tart cherry juice to help them calm down at night. There's wonderful herbal teas that are great for kids, like catnip, the herb we use for cats and cats love, is actually wonderfully calming for kids. Gotu kola is another herb that comes to mind for kids that helps increase concentration, wonderful for the immune system, and also very calming. So there's so many things that are great for kids. There are so many other herbs that I didn't talk about today that would be helpful to help with anxiety and sleep and all that stuff, but may be more prone to herb-drug interactions, so I just didn't mention them. I always just say everything with a grain of salt. It's best to kind of talk to your healthcare provider or work with an herbalist, and that way the herbalist is checking on your specific herb-drug interaction possibilities.
Excellent. Yeah, if anyone has any other questions, we can stay on for a few more minutes.
Yeah, I'm happy to stay here. I hope I didn't talk too fast through this, but I'm trying to fit a lot in and give you guys all a good amount of content so you can have fun in your kitchen. Like I mentioned before, I have some of these herbs on my website, or can do a consultation and work with you if you have questions about herb-drug interactions. So there's plenty of resources out there.
Looks like there's a follow-up question. Specifically, I'm looking at any interactions between these herbs only, not pharmaceutical drugs. So.
Oh, these herbs with each other? Like, don't mix this herb with that herb?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. No, one of the main things to look at when you're, for example, blending a tea is that you don't use conflicting herbs. You don't use an herb that's sedative, so the kind of herbs that like put you to sleep, and you also use an energizing herb. That would kind of cancel them out. It would be like, what's the point? So that's not an interaction. It's just kind of not ideal to use herbs in that way. So that's most of the the thing to look out for when combining herbs. These are all plants, and so very rarely, and none of what we use today, very rarely would there be an issue where it's a herb issue. You know, they have a negative effect on each other. Always I'm looking at herb drug interactions, but herb interactions, no. It's just like, you know, you make a salad and you can put whatever veggies in there. They don't interact with each other really. Just like only when they're going to like cancel each other out. So one property is energizing, one is sedative in that example earlier. But all the herbs today, you could totally use together. You could put the astragalus that we talked about, the astragalus root, you could put that in your herbal tea along with the ginger, the tulsi, everything else. So all these herbs can intermingle as long as you're just watching out for their properties and you're not putting a sleepy time herb with a more energizing
herb. We have a personal question, so I'm not exactly sure if you might have the answer right away, but someone is asking if astragalus will impacts you if you're taking synthroid for hyperthyroidism.
I probably not want to answer too many questions about a very specific drug or a very specific health concern. That would be where I would need to know all the factors and answer that question. And with astragalus, I would need to research with whatever drug that is. So I'm going to dodge that question. And if you want to work with me privately, or I can answer that question directly, knowing all the facts.
Can you use all lavender plants as culinary?
No, not all of them. You will always know the ones you can use culinary because they're labeled as culinary lavender. Some lavender is grown mainly for the scent or for the essential oil, and is not meant to be edible. So the culinary lavender, if you wanted to make a lavender tea, is what you would want, versus the lavender that is intended to be in a sachet just for scent or used for essential oil. So look for the culinary lavender if you're using it on top of food or as a tea.
And looking up motherwort, it looks familiar, wondering if it can be found in the wild.
Motherwort can be found in the wild. It also grows wonderfully. It's in our forests, and it grows abundantly. So if you grow it in your garden, put it in a space where you know it's going to creep, and it can really take over. If you're, you know, it's kind of like a mint. It will take over the garden if you let it.
Excellent. Those are all the questions that I'm seeing. Does anybody else have any questions?
Yeah, please email. Well, you'll get my email, so you can email anything, any questions, and you can go to my website if you want to work with me directly or have direct personal questions. And I'm happy to, you know, be of support, especially during this time.
Excellent. I really appreciate you coming on, and like she mentioned, we'll be sending out an email, and we hope that y'all will let us know how we did. There'll be a survey coming out. My dog is playing. Thank you all. Have a good evening.
Bye. Thank you.